Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our session on electrifying heating and cooling in buildings. My name is Juan Pablo Jiménez, and on behalf of IRENA, I'm going to briefly guide you through the session we have planned today. We also want to say before that many thanks to the European EHPA Association, which is organizing this session with us. So thank you, Thomas. So the topic we are discussing here today is really important in all regions of the world because buildings are responsible for 1/3 of the consumption of our energy system worldwide, and they are responsible for almost 1/4 of the CO2 emissions. So we really need to speed up the decarbonization of buildings without any delay if we really want to meet climate targets. In this context of decarbonizing buildings, power-to-heat solutions are at the center of this transformation because we have technology, it's highly efficient, and as someone said before in the morning, it's the age of implementation. So the real challenge now is not developing new technologies that they could be evolving over time, but we really need to discuss how we integrate power-to-heat and cooling solutions in our system without compromising the performance of our electricity grids. So that means including flexibility sources, including energy efficiency, and in all these buildings has a strong role and impact in achieving so. So today we want to leave the room with new insights into key innovations because we need to bring innovations into the market. And when we refer to innovations, we are not talking about reinventing the wheel. We are talking about combining elements that maybe they are all out there, but they are not using in the right way, or they are not combined in the right way to really harness all the potential that they can have together. So having said that, and without wanting to be too long in my introduction, I would like to tell you briefly what will happen next. First, for the audience, if you have questions, please, you can use Slido. You can scan the QR code and post it in the application on my colleague Dept. She will kindly handle your questions. But because we have a relatively cozy room, we will also have a handout microphone. So if you feel like sharing your question of your ideas or thoughts, please. One of my colleagues in the room will, Nadine, who is there at the back, will be sharing a microphone with you. So you're going to hear 3 presentations, and then we will go into the panel discussion and the closing remarks. So I strongly encourage you to actively participate in the discussion as much as you want. So without further delay, I will move on to the first presentation. I will be covering this one. My name is Juan Pablo Jiménez. I'm working as an energy analyst in IRENA. And I'm going to give you a small overview on the highlights from the Innovation Landscape report in what is related to electrification of buildings. We focused our analysis on heat pumps. As I said before, we have the technology which is efficient, but we need to find out how we put a lot of heat pumps in the market. How many heat pumps? According to the analysis performed by IRENA, we will need to have a strong increase of heat pumps from 58 million in 2020 up to almost 800 million in 2050. Also, the same trend applies to industry, which is a bit out of the scope, but in general, combining these 2 sectors, we need to have many more heat pumps in the market. And this will have a strong impact on the final energy consumption of electricity that will go from 34% to 73% in 2050. So this is a big challenge, and it cannot be done in any way. Otherwise, we will have to be investing large amounts of money in the infrastructure and grid resources. So why heat pumps? because they are highly efficient, because they use renewable heat. So we are taking ambient energy into our systems. It provides heat and cooling at the temperature ranges that we need in buildings. So here, contrary to industry, we don't have to look into how much temperature our process will need, because here, for having comfort in a home, heat pumps can play this role without any problem. And also an important element is that was mentioned today is that if we look globally, we cannot only focus on heating but also cooling. Cooling is growing and is expecting to grow in the coming years because two reasons. One is global warming, and second is that new regions in the world will increase the demand of comfort in households. But heat pumps, reverse heat pumps can also cover the same. So we have a wonderful technology there, and as I said before, let's discuss today how we integrate it into the system. But some people claim heat pumps are expensive. They say that in all buildings you have to perform a big renovation in order to achieve efficiencies. Our analysis in IRENA proved that cost of heat pumps is declining constantly over the past years. This is the example of the Italian market, where the one I bring here for two different technologies in both residential and commercial sectors. But this trend is observed in almost every market in the world. As a result, we have a market that is growing pretty fast. Here we bring a figure done by our partners today, the European Heat Pump Association, where we see in Europe the trend that heat pumps are following in number of units in the market. But it's not only the case of Europe, because we can say, okay, after the Ukraine crisis, the gas prices are skyrocketing, and that's why it is speeding up. We see again the same trend as, for example, in the Chinese market. We see that heat pumps, air-to-water heat pumps are growing. In Japan, you will listen after me from Japan, 86% of households, they have at least one room air conditioning. And the average amount of units, it's 2.4 per household. Similarly, in the US, we see that the sales of heat pumps has reached 4 million in 2021, which is more than twice the sales in 2010. So we see a global trend in the market in lowering prices and increasing amount of units in our houses and increasing the amount of the demand in our energy systems. Then we have a but. Of course, we always have a but. What is a but? That I already said we can put all these heat pumps in any way in our energy system. We have to follow what we call smart electrification, which means try to harness all benefits from the entire value chain of the heating or cooling supply and involving different dimensions. This you saw already for those who were in the previous session. You saw that we need to bring innovations from 4 dimensions. Not only the technology, that I showed you already that we have the technology, but also we need to design better markets. We need a better planning. And of course, we need business models. So we can all benefit from users to utilities to policymakers, every stakeholder involved should get benefit. And to get those, we need to apply a systemic approach. So then this systemic approach, based on innovation, must be at the center of any smart electrification strategy that we want to draw. Unfortunately, we don't have a solution that solves all our problems. As I said, heat pumps is a great technology, but it should be accompanied with other elements, otherwise we will fail in the electrification pathway. So in the Innovation Landscape report that was released last June 2023, we assessed three different pathways, and one of those is related to power to heat and cooling. That's why we have this session today. And in total, we covered 100 innovations, and in the specific case of heating and cooling, we identified 35 innovations that combine, not all of them, but some of them, depending on the context, can really make the rollout of heat pumps a reality. Here you can't really see it, but you can go online and check the report if you want to have further details and discuss with me or my colleagues later on. But this is how it looks, the table with all the innovations across the 4 dimensions I presented to you. And also they are classified depending on the innovation readiness level, the impact on electrification, and the impact on the smart electrifications, which we consider 2 different concepts. Heat pump, for example, they have a very high impact on the electrification, but if we don't bring flexibility, for example, thermal storage, heat pumps alone have a relatively low mark in smart electrification compared to thermal storage. How do we combine these innovations? So we have created what we call the toolbox, where we have one essential kit for those areas that they haven't thought about electrification of heating yet, hopefully not many. But we should start from there, combining some essential innovations. And those innovations are here. I will go through all of them, but it's only the important ones. We have low temperature heat pumps, we have thermal storage, we have dynamic tariff, we have holistic planning, and we have aggregators. Once we reach this level, we go on to the next step, and we have the heating kits that we have classified them in 3 different segments. One is building, one is industry, which we have another session for that, and then we have district heating and the cooling kit. So for the heating in buildings, we have additional elements like hybrid heat pumps, flexibility provision by thermal loads, cooling coupled with PV production, and some others. For district heating, we go into some of them are shared, but we go into a higher size, and we have one panelist will tell us more about this type of systems. And last, we have the cooling, where we have cooling is already largely electrified, but still we need to bring some elements related to flexibility and digitalization to really advance in the decarbonization of cooling. Another important one is the use of waste heat, that it's a great source that we are not using as much as we should. And it's also in some of these kits, you will see about waste heat recovery. So, just to conclude, I want to remark that the aim of the session is to bring together innovative experiences and market knowledge from our experts on how we can integrate more and more heat pumps in the system without compromising the power system, and applying a systemic approach, an approach that covers 4 dimensions and innovation that may arise from all these 4 dimensions. So that's all from my side. Now I will give the floor to Mr. Yoichi Fujita, who will give you an overview of the situation in Japan regarding heat pumps. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Fujita. This is my pleasure to introduce heat pumps in Japan today. My title is Accelerated Deployment of Heat Pumps through Achieving Japan's Net Zero 2050 Commitment, Policy, Market, and R&D. I work for NEDO. NEDO is one of the largest public R&D management organizations in Japan. NEDO is promoting and supporting R&D projects and integrating the combined effort of industry, academia, and government. Japanese population is 125 million, and land area is almost same as Germany. Population density is same as Belgium. Japan stretches from north to south, and there are cooling and heating demand almost area. Mean temperature of Tokyo is almost equal as Manila, 32 degrees, but we had 22 days of extremely hot day, which means more than 35 degrees C this year. Policy of decarbonization. Left figure shows 40 to 60% greenhouse gas reduction in FY 2030, compared with FY 2013 levels, and net zero by 2050. Right figure shows CO2 emission by sector. Industrial, transportation, commercial, and residential are main sectors. Quantitative targets are set for industrial heat pumps and commercial and residential heat pumps hot waters. Compared with result to Prospect 2020, progression rate of commercial and residential heat pumps are going well, but countermeasures are required for industrial heat pumps. Prospect 2030 for residential heat pumps was reviewed from 14 million to 15.9 million units. Policy of energy. Right figure shows electricity mix towards 2030, which aim renewable energy 36 to 38%, and nuclear energy 20 to 22%. Totally, approximately 60% of non-fossil fuel. Top runner program is to improve energy efficiency of 32 items energy consuming products. The program is regulated by Energy Efficiency Act and set its standard value, which should be complied to by each product manufacturer. Energy efficiency labeling also applied to air conditioners and heat pump operators. Heat pumps efficiency have been improving due to energy efficiency policies like Top Runner program. Awards are another driver for efficiency improvement. Along with the subsidy for industrial heat pumps and commercial heat pump hot waters, some subsidies for energy efficiency and Dept are also applicable to heat pumps. Next market, popular heat pumps type in Japan. Residential room air conditioners and commercial packaged air conditioners are air-to-air for cooling and heating purposes. Residential and commercial heat pump hot waters are air-to-water and hot water supply purpose. So commercial air conditioners installed in office building, hotel, and care center, school, and commercial hot water heat pumps. The heat pump hot waters installed in hospital, spa, and hotel and restaurant usually. So market, residential room air conditioners. Market of residential air conditioners is stable at just below 10 million units annually. Longer hours at home due to COVID-19 might have boosted the sales in 2020. And if you see the blue hatching and bed hatching, annual sales, its relationship with hot or cool summer. And market of commercial packaged air conditioner is stable at around 800,000 units annually. The surge in sales in 2019 might be attributed to the demand for 2021 Summer Olympics Games in Tokyo. Market of residential hot water heat pumps, so-called EcoHeat, is around 500,000 units annually with an increase of 30,000 units annually. The cumulative sales will reach 9 million units in this fall at this rate. Market of commercial hot water heat pump is around 3,000 units annually. The surge sales in 2019 might be attributed to the demand for 2021 Summer Olympics held in Tokyo. Next, NEDO R&D project on innovative thermal management materials and technology had started from 2015 and ended March 2023 with $6.8 million budget. A total of 15 companies, 11 universities, 2 research institutes was collaborated under the third. Development consists of technology of efficiency, reduce, and recycle, and thermal management system. Heat pumps can enroll in reusing thermal energy, such as high temperature heat pumps and high efficiency chiller. I will show you 2 examples of this project achievement. Left side is development high temperature heat pumps. Concept is high heat pump system that collect unused heat of 80 to 100 degrees C that is discharged from heating process and supplies 180 degrees C of high efficiency COP 3.5. NEDO project aim 1.75 times more efficient than conventional boiler system in terms of primary energy basis. Right side is development of heat cycle absorption chiller, which is driven with low temperature exhaust heat. This chiller can utilize hot water temperature down to 51 degrees. Although hot water temperature for conventional absorption chiller is 75 degrees C and higher. 4 units have been installed in Germany already. And this is summary of decarbonization, energy, incentives, market, and technologies. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fujita, for the detailed presentation on the activities happening in Japan around heat pumps. Before moving on, I would like to remind you that if you plan to use Slido, please select the lounge room, otherwise questions will be sent to the other room, and we don't want that. So on top of the screen you will see the different places. So without further delay, I want to give the floor to Mr. Nowak, who is the Secretary General of the European Heat Pump Association. He will share with you some keynotes on the heat pump as a commodity in the electric grid of the future, and then he will, after that, he will kick off the panel discussion. So please, Thomas, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Juan Carlos, and thank you also to IRENA for inviting me and for allowing us a pleasure to co-organize this event. We didn't have a lot of work with this because IRENA did a great job. Just had to attend a few calls here and there. I will not give a big presentation because I think we have heard already what's happening around the world. I could give you the similar suggestion and overview to Europe, but I want to challenge you with some other thoughts. I have spent about 15 years of my life in making heat pumps known. And I think now the next 15 years, not of my life actually, but maybe of other people, have to be spent on making them unknown. I do think that heat pumps have to become a commodity. They are so prominent in their benefits for the energy and climate targets that they should be everywhere, but ideally they should be visible to no one. They should simply do their job in an integrated solution, electrified buildings for heating, cooling, hot water that are connected also to batteries and to electric vehicles. Maybe you can also consider an electric vehicle battery on wheels anyways. So, quick, anyway, where are we going? Because to go there, we have to have a huge market penetration, and heat pumps have to be developed even further, and hence we are at the right point in time at the Innovation Week. While I'm thinking that we have heat pumps available pretty much for every application, there is still room for a little bit of innovation. And if you have paid close attention to Juan Pablo's presentation, and you have seen 34% for 2022 even, I think, but we have slightly different coverage of countries. So we even conclude that with the full spectrum of countries in Europe, we have even 39%. So it's not a collision of values, it's just a different system boundary. What you can see here is also that it took 4 years, after long years of very unstable, very unambitious developments, it took only 4 years to double the market. Now we'll see if we can do that again. Unfortunately, there's quite some uncertainty in the European markets at least, and so for the first half of 2023 we see only an increase of 4%. But I don't think it's so bad, because that gives us ample reason to approach policymakers and to say, hey, you have to do more, and I will come to a conclusion on what that means for us. Then, what do I mean by making heat pumps disappear? Then I think this magic triangle can give us a bit, because if heat pumps are everywhere, they have to be bought by everybody, and that seems to be quite a challenge, considering that the technology is still not in everybody's everyday life, at least on the consideration of what you do, because there are other things that are always more important. I could say that we have a parallel session on electrification of transport, and they have the big room, and heating and cooling, let me say it again, is getting the small room, because people say it has to be taken more, it has to be taken up more, but then when it comes to deciding what is the more interesting topic, typically the other topics, and electricity is one of them, gets the center stage. We'll get there eventually, I think. So what this shows is the magic triangle. How do I get end users to become interested in their own energy demand? And that often happens with photovoltaic. You install a photovoltaic system on your roof, you want to be independent, you want to be resilient, and all of a sudden you have too much electricity. What happens then? Then you say, what can I do with this electricity? Typically, depending on the regulation, you don't get much money for that. So you want to have another use case for that. Could be an electric vehicle, could be a heat pump. My claim is that if we start this, if end users start to consider their own energy use and realize that they can become prosumers, eventually they will end up in photovoltaic, heat pumps, and battery/electric vehicle. How do we get there? The most important thing for heat pumps to fly, and this is pretty much true for across the world, is the cost of electricity versus the cost of gas, the relative prices. What we see today is that everywhere where gas is cheap and electricity is expensive, the heat pump markets don't fly. So if policymakers want to do one thing, then they have to make sure that the ratio is around, and you can see that so well, the ratio is around 2. We do want to have relative price of electricity versus gas of around 2, because that allows end users to save, and that brings this into a business case. And of course it takes a lot of other things that we need. I don't want to show them all, I just want to show you one picture. This is the Energy Commissioner, Carrie Simpson. She was also here earlier today, and she had the generosity to give us a special meeting with her where we handed over the heat pump accelerator document. We have worked together with a number of stakeholders in society and have put together a list of recommendations, actually it's close to 50, that we think need to happen to make any type of legislation ready for fast heat pump deployment, and I could also say to make any type of legislation ready for efficient heating and cooling, and for renewables heating and cooling, and for resilient heating and cooling. And so I could also say we are making societies ready for sustainable heating and cooling, for a sustainable energy system. This is now transposed into what the Commission calls a heat pump action plan. We hope to see it ready by the end of the year. Maybe Stefan can say a bit more about that if he wants to, but in the end anyways there's going to be a publication coming up. And with that, I want to close my initial thoughts and my initial remarks, and would like to ask my panel to the stage, because it is a very good panel, even though we're missing one person, Sandra Trittin, who is really very seasoned expert on demand-side flexibility and smart grids, but she had to stay home and take care of her daughter who had an accident, so I sent our best wishes to her, but we have to do without her. I also think that we can do a lot to overcome her, but I think we cannot replace her, so that's a pity. But please, we are talking this afternoon to Stefan Moser, Head of Units, Buildings and Products in the European Commission in DG ENER, because the European Commission is a huge beast, so it's always important to put people, to assign them where they are. Then we have Kazuyoshi Nakano. He's from the Center of Research, from the Central Research Institute of Electric Power Industry in Japan. Would you want to take place here? That's very nice. And then we have Matthias Grapow, a bit easier. He works in one of the foundations of the heat pump industry in the factory of Jradi, but he now works for Maschinenfabriken Hauptburg Nürnberg, but if you want to have the acronym is MAN, so it's much easier to go for the average tongue. And last but not least we have Ezzeddine Jradi, and he is working for Emicool. It's the district cooling company in Dubai, in the United Arab Emirates. And I think with that we close the group, because we have started to talk about heat pumps, but heat pumps are providing heating and cooling all the time. And so we are also closing with cooling. And we have so thank you very much then for all of you for coming here, and also for the time that you spent with us in the preparation. We have discuss a little bit what could be most interesting for you. You can shape that discussion, as Pablo has said, by asking questions on Slido. What we have in mind is we will go through the few questions that all the panelists have an opinion to, and then we open the floor for questions from the audience. Since we are in the Innovation Week, and we have heard that there is innovations organized around technology, around markets, around systems, and planning around business models, the first question that we would like to hand around, and that we would like to connect insight from the panel, is what key innovations they think is missing. Maybe you can organize your answer a little bit around these four sectors. We start with Stefan, because I always find it very interesting, if you follow me and think that technology is ready, what type of political innovation do we need, and is that even a word that is used inside the Commission and with the colleagues?
Thanks a lot, Thomas. Good afternoon to all of you. Very happy to be here. I think innovation is very important on heat pumps. As you said, less technological. There's some technological innovations still to be done. Notably, I would say full assurance on the climate proofing of heat pumps. We are aware of the discussion, of course. But I would say also the systemic integration, the full systemic integration, and making them fully mainstreamed and considering that to be a kind of standard product and not a kind of complicated, difficult, expensive product. I think that is important for the regulatory environment, but also the perception in society. Depends on the country, but in some countries they still are considered to be exceptionally burdensome, expensive, etc. So that is something which we need to overcome. As you said, Thomas, to make them basically just standard. You said unknown. They shouldn't be unknown, but simply normalized. Yeah? So for the benefits which they have, for that we need a systemic approach, and I would say the pros and cons and how to shape, how to integrate these funds will depend very much on the needs of a specific country, region, climate zone, and also the needs of the inhabitants of what is the building about, how to make it heat pump ready. I think that is something where we still need to make progress, at least in public perception and reassurance by citizens that heat pumps can be and should be implemented, that the building can be adjusted to make it efficiently usable for a heat pump. And that is on the one hand structural improvements to the building, structural modifications, which should be, I would say, accompanied through technical and financial support from advisors, including from the public authorities, but also regulatory tools such as you mentioned, the electricity gas price ratio, which require a political decision in a country to recalibrate the taxation system, and of course also the subsidy system, how to move forward on decarbonization, and what is the public communication by the government, by the local, regional authorities, but also I would say the mainstream perception amongst energy companies, installers, yeah? So the technicians which have daily contact, how do they communicate about them, how do they see them? And there's still, I think, a lot of improvements to be done, a lot of way to go, so that this becomes a mainstream, I would say, normalized product, as you mentioned, unknown, where people simply don't talk about it anymore, like a daily business, basically. That's not yet the case, and from the Commission side, we are trying to, as Thomas has said, coming forward based on, of course, also your very useful accelerator from the European Heat Pumps Association, Heat Pump Action Plan, which brings together, I would say, the narrative, makes it round on the various components, innovation, technology, regulatory, finance, skills, industrial competitiveness, in order to get over this, I would say, this kind of situation in which we are still in, to normalize heat pumps and make them systemically more relevant, and of course also make them grow, not as the only heating and cooling product, but as a very important contribution and component of the energy transition.
I think that's a very nice segue to, let's just jump over the whole world, half the world to Japan. Would you say that heat pumps are normalized in Japan already, and if not, what is still missing? What do you need in Japan to move them even further?
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much for organizing this session and inviting me. It's very honored to be here and to share the experience of Japan for adapting heat pumps. In terms of your questions, the characteristics of using household heat pumps in Japan is primarily related to the demand for hot water supply, actually. So let me talk about hot water heaters in this context. So many households in Japan take a bath with fulfilling the bathtub with hot water kind of every day, and this is kind of the culture in Japan. So it's resulting in a high demand for hot water in our countries. So the hot water actually accounts for the 25% of CO2 emissions in household sectors. So that is significant emissions. So the household heat pump water heaters, also known as EcoCute, as mentioned in San's presentations, were introduced starting in the 2000s, and currently the 24% of detached houses have adopted EcoCute systems.
So the EcoCube systems became popular by heating water using cheap nighttime electricity and storing it in a tank. Then after the Great East Japan earthquakes in 2011, the renewables received support through the feed-in tariff policy, and the PV system began to spread in households. So in the next steps, I think that it will be essential to heat water during the day using PV energy. This approach offers the advantage of effectively utilizing renewable energy during the day, along with shorter heating times and reduced heat losses. So this kind of products is already actually available in market in Japan, and in some regions they are offered in combination with discounted daytime electricity rates. And also some models even automatically shift the heating time to daytime based on weather forecast information. So it may be important for manufacturers and utility companies to collaborate on R&D and the pricing strategies in this region. Thank you very much.
All right, and now we have to take another jump that goes in a different direction. We come back to Europe, but we are also changing scale by a factor of 1,000 about? About 10,000. 10,000, okay, so then there we go. Maybe you want to explain a bit more. What's the innovation that you are pushing into the market and that is actually taken up with a lot of appreciation by cities and district heating companies alike?
Yes, thank you for inviting me as well, and you are right. So so maybe I explain where we are coming from. So we at MAN Energy Solutions, our traditional business was based in the oil and gas industry, in the fertilizer industry, in the basic industries where we supply technology into that market. We applied products we are using in these areas to the heat pump business, okay? So we took a mature, established product, we designed a complete heat pump system around that product, and we implemented that into the market. If I talk about large-scale heat pumps, I'm talking about heat pumps in a magnitude of 125 megawatts. So in the similar dimension like a combined power plant. So if you would create the same amount of heat with the highly standardized commodity heat pump you're using for residential buildings, you would need 10,000 of that. Okay? The product we are installing in these heat markets, we are installing in district heating networks. And especially in the Nordics, so we see a strong market in the Scandinavians. One reason is because electricity is very cheap there. Using a heat pump makes only sense if you use renewable energy, that's clear. And in Denmark, in Finland, in Sweden, or Norway, you have plenty of that. And that's the reason why the business case is a value business case, taking renewable energies and driving large-scale heat pumps for district heating networks. We are right now in the installation of one heat pump in the city of Esbjerg, a 50 megawatt thermal heat pump. And we will go into operation with that heat pump in the end of this year, beginning of next year, and we will switch immediately 25,000 households from gray heat to green heat, because the coal-fired power plant, which is producing the heat so far, will be switched off. We are taking seawater heat and electrical energy produced from wind turbines and producing pure green heat to heat 25,000 households. We see a huge market there. We see our self-funds are increasing steadily, and the lever to drive the decarbonization fast is by realizing such mega projects from our opinion. Clearly based because we have such kind of product. We are not in the commodity market with small heat pumps, but I think if we want to drive the electrification of heat fast, we have to tackle large-scale projects.
What we can say, thank you Matthias, we can say that the innovation on the one hand is the replacement of an oil and gas boiler in individual buildings, and on the other hand, we are replacing big coal-fired or coal generation power plants and move them, as you say so nicely, from grey to green heat.
Yes.
How many of you know that heat pumps are providing heating and cooling at the same time always? So at least half the room. So that makes it easier for you, Ezzeddine, to explain what you're doing. So what's the innovation that you bring into the picture? And I think this is a really an important point, because also at the COP we will talk about a lot of things, renewable energy. We'll probably not talk too much about heating, because we have to talk more about cooling. That applies to many more people. More than half of the population on this world needs cooling continuously. Please, what's the innovation there?
Yeah, good afternoon everyone. Thank you Thomas, and thank you IRENA for hosting us today. I believe, as you mentioned earlier, you've been creating awareness about heat pumps. We are also creating awareness about district cooling. So where does the innovation factor plugs into district cooling? So if you look back at the model that IRENA came out with, working on 4 pillars, district cooling already operates in all those 4 categories. So I'll just give a background of what is district cooling, how did it start, and what is the background behind it. I'm a Lebanese working in UAE, specifically in Dubai. And for those of you who don't know how is the weather in Dubai, it's basically 7-month heat, and the rest is acceptable. So with that, there is a necessity for people to live there, which is basically cooling. And to provide cooling, again, if you think about it as a demand and a supply, there are many constraints. So as we heard earlier in the other panel discussion, the government has to come up with electricity required. If we compare traditional cooling, which is a form of split unit, wind unit, or other types of cooling, versus chilled water cooling, which comes from air-cooled or water-cooled, there's a huge impact on energy consumption. So we can say between the traditional cooling, which is a split or wind unit, versus water cooled, we have a 30 to 40% of energy saving. So that's by itself an innovation. Moving forward, creating the cooling as a service, whereby the customer is metered, so he understands his energy consumption. And accordingly, we understand the load profile. That's an incentive as well that comes plugged in with the district cooling to allow us to understand how we can economize the either energy production versus energy consumption. Digitalization is inbuilt in the supply chain of cooling, either from production, distribution, to even energy transfer. So that's also another way of plugging in innovation. To bring in a perspective, regulation was also lagging on that perspective. However, the main incentive was basically to normalize the consumption of energy. Because if we think about it, as we have heard earlier, in many countries in the world there's a peak when there is a heat. But another feature of district cooling is called the economy of scale. So to give a comparison, if you have you're cooling at home, you operate it when you need it. And this is where the peak happens, right? Whereas for us, we're always producing energy and sending it to the one who basically needs it. So that by default minimizes the peaks along the supply chain. So these could be correlated with the business model that IRENA has brought.
I need to ask one follow-up question. Because if you provide cooling, you always also provide waste heat. What happens with that?
Actually, I was discussing this earlier. I need to go a little bit technical on this. So district cooling disseminates heat through what is called the cooling tower. So it's like the engine of your car, you need a radiator. So the radiator in district cooling is the cooling tower. It disseminates the heat into the environment, right? But if you compare it So for us, we supply 32,000 customers. Imagine if each one of them had a window or split unit dissipating heat individually versus what district cooling.
Yeah, but
I do not have the figures of how much we dissipate, but I believe it will not be more than 2 to 3 degrees within 1 kilometer around the cooling plant.
I'm not punishing you for that. I just think it's really important to note that if we think that cooling is so important, and I want to handle that back and also to Stefan to talk a little bit about legislation. If we are providing thermal waste, you know, if this was a waste legislation issue, you wouldn't be allowed to do that. You would need a permit to discharge waste into the environment. And I think now in times of energy efficiency, we have to become much more aware of this closing of energy cycles that is possible, and we have to make sure that it's also from a legal perspective encountered. We discussed a few of the legislations. Energy Efficiency Directive and the Renewable Energy Directive are just about to be finished. Energy Efficiency Directive is ready. Renewable Directive is hoped to be passed before Christmas. These are part of the Green Deal. Does this type of legislation of thermal waste, is that part of the discussion in Europe? Can you hand over?
Thank you very much. I think it is necessary for systemic efficiency, so industrial symbiosis. So what is a waste product for one can be a very important production factor for another factory. So we have to see that we close the cycle, that we don't waste as much as in the past. But of course, this is an ongoing challenge to bring together basically the producers and users in a way that mutually they can benefit from each other. I mean that in some countries it's called industrial symbiosis, for instance. Creating synergies amongst a network of different companies, or also building cities to think through the entire system and put things together. I think it's addressed in legislation, I think, by the objectives which we have, because this increases efficiency, overall efficiency of society, and therefore basically also reduces the energy needs and material needs of a society. So definitely it's addressed by the broader targets, the collective targets, either for country or at European level, or I would say even globally, where we have global targets.
Yeah. Let me also allow you a second question, because as you mentioned so nicely that now we're discussing flexibility and a switch to services. Do you think that the current policy that we are seeing, is that recognizing services more, as maybe in the past it was more product-related legislation, and do we have, especially in the context of innovation and digital innovation, do we recognize on the policy level flexibility and give it a value, and do we recognize services as a means to efficiency?
I would say yes. Through the overall targets, we are called upon to act efficiently. Therefore, I would say to share out resources, and I think the service market, or thinking of energy, but also materials, machinery as services, we can use more efficiently those either products or commodities, and that is one way of thinking about, I would say, more systemic approaches. So as a society, not just it's mine and I use it just for myself and it's otherwise idle, but rather put things to the maximum use in society, be it for products or other commodities, such as also energy, heating and cooling. So definitely. But I think we have such a huge potential from heat pumps, because they provide also, as regards water heating or cooling, depending on where you are, a huge storage potential, which is exactly the component which we need for renewable energy, which is of course more variable, and then we can buffer the systems basically, so that also security and supply concerns can be very well addressed, because you can store upfront and modulate and buffer the system basically. So that also is very important, and of course the what probably Sandra would have talked about, the smart responses, digitalization, active consumers, active producers that we think as a system, not just everyone, just for myself, but how do I fit in the broader picture? I think that's what really is important.
That makes me very curious, how is the situation in Japan? Because you will see in Europe that now with increasing market penetration, people say more and more, the grids will not hold. We as EHPA, we have made a survey among a number of utilities and we have asked them, what about if we had 50 million heat pumps in the European grid? Will the grids fail? Will we have blackouts? And the answer was resounding no. The grids have always been changing and they can adapt. But how do you see the situation in Japan with a much higher market penetration, Nakano-san, and maybe also a small detour on is flexibility, are prosumers that using heat pumps as grid stabilization issues, are they part of the business model of your society?
Yes, in case of Japan, as you mentioned, the heat pumps penetrated approximately 90% of households. But I think it's as the air conditioners actually. So while the EcoCube systems has not yet achieved such widespread adoptions, and also there are only 40% of the household uses the heat pump air conditioner as a main space heater. So so the main the usage of the heat pumps is cooling actually in Japan. So the huge electricity demand is not yet the severe issues in Japan actually. Maybe in Japanese context, there are more important issues will be how to utilize the kind of surplus renewables in the electricity systems. So maybe, as I already mentioned, there maybe heating the hot water in the daytime could be the one solution for that issues.
So 10,000 EcoCubes or one MIN big kit. How is that becoming relevant for flexibility services into the grid?
Yes, for sure. I mean, what we see that if you want to unbundle the demand and supply situation, you have to introduce heat storage technologies, what we see on heat pump projects as well. So the project I just mentioned in Denmark, there a huge heat storage tank is installed to balance out the differences in between heat supply and demand. There are different technologies. I mean, the landscape report clearly shows the various technologies we can use for using heat storage devices like molten salt, like liquefied air energy storage, like water, like ice. And I think depending on the project-specific needs, we will see more and more the introduction of heat storage technologies connected with the supply of heat pumps, especially in the district heating sector, where we are talking more about larger scale heat pumps, where it's of utmost importance to have a balancing technology available to level out the heat supply and heat demand.
Do you see the same from cooling? You have cooling storage?
Yeah, definitely. So district cooling comes out of the box with the cooling storage. So it's called the thermal storage tank, and it's basically 20% of the stored capacity of any plant. And we usually use it for several purposes. Number one, to enhance the efficiency of the chillers. Number two, in case there is not a major load on the network, for example, during winter, we use it basically, we charge it during the night and then we use it during the day. So the first one is basically, as I said, resilience. The second one is basically for efficiency. And this is basically an inbuilt feature of district cooling.
And I can just provide glasses for everybody. We're not cooling here, right? And would you consider that in the future, if you were moving, hopefully to use some of the heat, would your system become then really part of the flexibility provision to green electricity provision?
Definitely. So to think about it, because the consumption of electricity related to district cooling is in gigawatt. Accordingly, it will become a major investment for our company, for example, to take this load. So as such, we're relying on the government in terms of its commitment to the net zero of converting this fossil fuel-based electricity to renewable electricity. So for that, it will require major investment, and we consider it at the moment as prohibitive. However, most governments right now, they have their 2030 and 2050 commitments, so accordingly, we will be moving to renewable along with the government.
Okay, then we had another question that we discussed before, and that was, now we're shifting a little bit the perspective. So if we want to deploy faster, the issue of permitting is in everybody's mind, because sometimes we all know how many kilometers of paper you have to print before you get a permit to a wind farm. Is that the same situation for big cooling devices? Is that the same situation for example, your project in Denmark, Matthias? And is that the same, or is the European Commission picking that up? And I know that there is a precaution now in the Renewables Directive, but I think it would be important to mention that. So maybe we start here on the problem side, and then Stefan, you can talk a little bit about the solution. I don't know how that looks like in Japan, if permitting is an issue at all. Maybe it's not. Then we could learn from you how to make it faster.
Well, talking about regulation in UAE, it's divided between Dubai and Abu Dhabi. Abu Dhabi has been leading on regulation related to district cooling. However, Dubai has been working in the past 9 years on regulation, and the regulators have issued the directives around 1.5 years. The main focus of regulation has been basically to protect the interests of the consumer, because district cooling is a new utility, so a lot of consumers don't understand the tariff, the obligation of the provider, the liability in case it happens, and the complexity of district cooling. It involves a lot of stakeholders in the supply chain, facility managers, developers, master developers, as well as the operators and the consumer themselves. So regulation in Dubai is, as I said, focused on, to operate, you need to now have a permit from the government, and you need to, they will authorize your asset and operation. They will make sure that your tariff are in compliance to the baseline. Moreover, there are aspects related to ensuring that there is a good quality of service. So this is basically the focus of regulation right now.
And how long does it take?
To give a clear perspective about the, in UAE there are 3 major players in district cooling. I believe the ones in Dubai have complied completely to the permits. So the government said that we will authorize whatever is existing, or for newcomers there will be a process. In Abu Dhabi, I know that people are still struggling to authorize their assets to receive the permit. However, it's mostly, the challenge is mostly commercial, because there are 3 major players, and the tariffs are varying between the 3, and in some cases, for example, consumption is metered versus the others, consumption is not metered. This has a direct impact on the consumer. So we have a mixed, let's say, approvals going on, but I would say in Dubai, the majority are right now accredited.
So it's more contractual issue. How do you see that in your projects? Maybe you can also give an overview of different projects that you have from country to country.
Yes, so it differs from country to country, you're right. We see more the technical aspect of permitting. We are not involved in the permitting commercial-wise from our customers, because that's the business of our customers. But we are involved strongly in the permitting process from the technical perspective. And for that we have have to provide information our clients or customers need to put in the permit to get approval for the project. What we see, it takes much too long, so we are active on projects, and easily we do not see any activities of projects because the permitting process takes so long, easily 1 or 2 years. And what we see as well in the past is, for example, that technologies which are part of the permitting process are going to change. You just mentioned the refrigerant discussion we have in Europe at the moment. So when a client, for example, puts in a permit based on a synthetic refrigerant, then he might come not through with this refrigerant, and that's what we have seen in projects, for example, that first documents we created for the permit was based on a synthetic refrigerant, and the client came back to us and says, no, there's no way to get that permit for a synthetic refrigerant, we have to change to natural one, and then the permitting process starts not from new, but will be extended, and it could be much faster, the permitting process, and for that, we need that to accelerate the electrification of heat.
Is that an issue in Japan at all? Permitting times, how fast can I go after deciding that I want to use heat-pump technology?
Yes, the one aspect would be the policy and regulation, I think. So while Japan has set ambitious goals for the decarbonization, it has primarily focused on the adoption of renewable energy and energy efficiency measures. So not so sufficiently focused on the proactive efforts in demand-side strategies like electrifications. So the current rate of adoption of eco-fuel system is actually insufficient to achieve the Japanese decarbonization goals. So I think to address this, the discussions are needed on how to implement the regulatory measures as well in combination with incentives.
We need to discuss a little bit more what we could do to accelerate the deployment of EcoGrid units. But before we do that, I would like to give Stefan the floor to explain a little bit what Europe is doing in order to make it easier to install the technology.
Thanks a lot, Thomas. I think permitting, we should probably keep that in mind, is in principle a societal decision-making process. Yeah? So, and I think there we have a common interest to make it as efficient as possible, so not to basically waste time or let things lie around and just wait for nothing, but to basically balance the interest, bring into the decision-making all the relevant considerations, environmental, energy, also to think safety, which are necessary. So I think that's the starting point, where we have to decide how can we make sure that what needs to be decided is done as fast as possible, but without losing, I would say, the legitimacy of the result, that the result is accepted and by those, by society more broadly, by the different interests in society. And I think that's also the starting point in the Renewables Directive. This was brought up that it was considered to be indeed too long, but not so much in the sense of too long because we want to do it just tomorrow, but unnecessarily long, that it's inefficient to wait so long. And I think there's a common challenge for all public authorities, but also in large companies when decisions need to be taken. Why does it take so long? If there's a good reason for it, because you need to take into account all sorts of considerations which need to be brought in, then it's justified. But if it's just a kind of stupid waiting for nothing, then of course it needs to be accelerated and reduced. And I think it's useful to have targets, really think what is the current situation, where can we improve, do we need really all steps, or can we also bring together and reduce the complexity of decision-making processes and speed up as much as possible without losing anything. And Europe indeed has called upon member states to think that through, to reduce the time needed without actually reducing the legitimacy of that. This of course is now general, but it requires basically a critical look by officials, by politicians, also by stakeholders, what actually could be reduced in order to get there more quickly. We need speed, we need efficiency in order to meet our targets and not basically take out the dynamics of important projects and make them possibly then even move somewhere else, or investors lose interest. I think that is the important thing. But in principle, I think I would say we need a positive acceptance of permitting as something in principle useful, but of course only useful insofar as it's efficiently organized and legitimate. So
we have a number of questions on that topic. I wanted to ask you anyways, do you think that the communications chain is fast enough from somebody that encounters this issue of getting a permit or not getting it actually to maybe even your level in the commission, where we say, okay, this is something that applies to everybody and needs to be addressed by legislation, by regulation, or by directive?
In Europe, we are basically at the I would say the most I would say general level. So we are not, for instance, usually permitting in detail individual projects. That may happen, but usually it's for the member states. It depends very much on the organization in respective parts of the world, how this is organized, in which way. And of course, stories come to us, or we are aware of certain improvement potential, and we try to address it to the extent that it is useful to address it at European level. For instance, when it's linked directly to a European directive, a European law. But in many ways, it is indeed for the national administrations to flesh out and to implement also, I would say, faster or rather more efficient permitting. And I think that goes far beyond energy, goes into any walk of life, so anything. So just what we really need also to equip the administrations, I would say, which often are, of course, are involved in permitting, with sufficient resources, because often it's just the, I would say, the unfortunate staff situation that they don't have enough people, and then they say it just takes a year because we couldn't deal with it. Yeah?
Well, obviously, having less red tape would need less people, right? And if you make a very complicated process, you need a lot of people to...
I think it's red tape. I mean, the very word red tape implies, and often that's the case, that it's useless, that it's not justified. Yeah. I think, of course, often the label red tape is put on it, but in principle, it should be actually, I would say, creating legitimacy in society for decisions that they are also accepted by everybody else, because they are opposing interests. Just look at the environment and energy, for instance, they often oppose these interests.
Yeah, so I mean, the way you put it, I think is actually very important for all of us to see it also from the perspective of a legislator, to say what we want to have something that can be accepted by everybody. How fast can we do that before it creates tension and friction afterwards? Let's move to the questions from the audience. You can actually ask a few more if you want, because we have about another 15 minutes roughly, right? And then we will close with the final question on what we can do. Let me just ask first we don't have the most counts anymore, but anyways, the question was residential PV as catalyst for heat pumps. The answer is rather quickly. Flexibility is the answer. If everybody can have a flexible electricity tariff, that's about the same as having their own photovoltaic on your roof. And the second answer to that would be, from my perspective, rented photovoltaic arrays, and then you can do it like the Dutch. The Dutch have this idea that you can participate by investing into a photovoltaic power plant in your neighborhood, in your postcode actually, and if you do so, this will be accounted for as if it was on your own roof. So I hope that answers that question. The second one, this is very detailed on the Japan versus Germany, so I would rather not want to do that, but just Ezzeddine, here's the question. What's the biggest challenge for district cooling adoption in Middle East and North Africa and the global south in general? How quickly can you scale for the whole world?
Yeah, so in terms of challenges, there are many. Actually, and I would like to bring a story to that. So, district cooling has to start with urban planning, because it's a way of doing a lot of pre-activities. So, district cooling comes in with a master developer, because it needs to understand the load profile, it needs to understand the network, it needs to understand the operation and maintenance. And for that, So the opportunity is basically, this is the first challenge. You need to find a new community. So in our industry, we call it green field or brown field. It's easy if it's a green field. There is a new area to be developed. There is a new community to be developed. So finding these kind of opportunities basically with the right load profile. Because for example, district cooling operates better in high intensity areas. For example, residential, malls, airports, versus, let's say, luxury villas, etc., etc. So those two are challenges, finding the right community and finding the right profile. Moving forward, district cooling is an intensive financial investment. So there should be a kind of a partnership, and this is where either the banks, they don't fund, for example, for a long term, they believe in short tenors, whereas our investment, the assets related to that can live up to 50 or 30 years. So getting funding is the third challenge. However, I believe right now, as we see that a lot of investment is going into green investment, so a lot of green investment funds are capitalizing on investing in this kind of infrastructure. That would be the third one. The fourth one would be definitely the climate, because district cooling needs to be in a climate where you should have consistent operation to have a proper ROI. That's number 4, I think 5. Number 6 would be basically, as usual, the thing that we hear mostly is the talent. That's very important. And then number 7 would be where do you innovate? So when you start as a district cooling provider, you are mostly doing a job on the whole supply chain, from production, distribution, billing and collection. So if you think as a company, where do you put your budget, in which vertical? So we need to see more decoupling of this kind of supply chain to allow more innovation and more startups to happen. So I would say this is holistically where the main challenge of district cooling would be right now.
Thank you, Matthias. I think you could also repurpose your systems for cooling, right? So do you see them similar, the challenges, or do you have other items to add?
At the moment, we have other items there, because what we see, and we have a product where we want to combine heating and cooling and storage. We call it electrothermal energy storage system. The challenges we are facing is to get the stakeholders to one table to develop projects, because there is no real sector coupling. If we talk about complete projects and we want to combine cooling and heating and re-electrification, for example, what we could do with our system as well, we are seeing, let's say, the different interests of the different sectors, the stakeholders. And if we are trying to develop, let's say, a business case together, then we see quite fast that the interests are completely different, from the cooling people to the heating people, or the re-electrification people. So I have seen in the landscape toolbox that there is waste heat integration, eco-industrial parks, which are measures which are going to be tackled. I really like to see that, because this is supporting the sector coupling mindset, because if we really want to develop electrification of heat most efficiently, we have to combine heating and cooling. And this is at the moment not really going on. That's what we see.
Do we see that you're nodding vigorously? Do we see that on the policy level, the integration of heating and cooling, you think?
We need to see it, we do see it also. I think that what we need more is district approaches, systemic approaches, that the question is asked, how does it all fit together, basically, yeah? And that applies to cooling networks, to heating networks, and ideally also to a combination of both. But it goes far beyond that. It goes into a connection with mobility, electrification, the grid question, storage, but also actually using various sources of energy, a combination of different technologies, geothermal, for instance, and heat pumps, and possibly also some gaseous solutions, to put them together, not to see them as, I would say, exclusive to one another, but rather what are the strengths and weaknesses of the site, of the region, of the local environment. And then there we can generate the highest societal efficiency. Just to mention, I mean, in Denmark, for instance, but also in other countries, you have very successful projects combining geothermal and heat pumps, where you increase the temperature through a heat pump, but you come to quite a long way already through geothermal, and that can be used much more also in other countries, and in Europe and elsewhere. And I think that's the question: what are the assets which we can use? How do we bring together the people? How do we optimize municipal district planning, and have a full assessment of the various assets which we have, but also the challenges in terms of possible problems, environmental problems, to have, I would say, a higher added value of more integrated and also district solutions requires communication, an active role by local, regional politicians often, and also the openness by citizens to really work together. And for that we need facilitators. And I would say that can create then this kind of synergies which need to be without that we won't get to the necessary efficiency. On all these different questions.
Well, this was a very, very fast ride through society. I think if we want to deploy, if we want to look at that more, it gives us enough space and material for another conference, because then we can discuss how sector integration, how levels of society integration, how system integration becomes innovation. Integration becomes an innovation strategy. I wanted to touch a little bit one more time on the Japanese situation. You said that the air conditioning units are used for air conditioning, the EcoCubes are used for hot water. Now we have the perfect solution here to integrate the two. Sector integration could be also using of waste heat of individual units for hot water generation. Is that at all an aspect that you're considering?
So, one more question.
If you look at the waste heat from air conditioning devices, Stefan has made the case for system integration. Matthias has said we cannot innovate if we don't connect heating and cooling. You have presented that Japan has a great market penetration for air conditioning units and for EcoCubes for hot water generation, but would it not make sense in this context to combine the two? You know, we start with a small level and then we jump over to the two gentlemen here and say we can also do this in big units.
I would not think that would not the cases we have in Japan, the EcoCubes and the space heating systems. We don't have such kind of integration, I think. Maybe in sector integration could be EV batteries and also the all electric houses. And so this kind of sector integrations is more important because in Japanese context, the important issue could be the resilience of the housing actually. So providing electricity from the EV as a batteries in case of the blackouts could be the really important functions for the resilience of the houses. And this kind of resilience issues the peoples are concerned about. So this kind of sector integration would be more important in Japanese context.
Wonderful. I think we would then close here and wrap it up. Alex Holmberg, thank you for putting your name down here. Just find me with that. I will answer your questions, I think, bilaterally, and I would like to ask everybody in this room for a last statement, which is always so nice, because it also has been asked quite a few times here, what do we need in order to accelerate implementation? From our perspective, we have the opinion that technology is there. I think we have also heard from Stefan that legislation has a lot of preconditions created now that could accelerate the energy transition also in heating and cooling and system integration and innovation. But I would like to ask you, if you had this very famous one wish, what should policymakers understand from you? And I rephrase the question for you, Stefan. What would you want to see industry deliver to you so that you can actually be more innovative in legislation?
Well, I would say it's a little bit difficult. It's a difficult wish because, as we said, mostly for district cooling to exist, it requires high density communities. And again, the government might have different opinion on how they need to position areas, right? For example, high-end, medium-end, etc. And that by default creates a limitation of the adoption of district cooling. However, on one side, greater adoption of district cooling helps in putting pressure on the grid. So I would highly recommend that the government would reconsider urban planning, whereby, as my fellow panelists mentioned, it's a form of integration. So we have limited resources, right? We have useful assets, so why not make a good story out of it?
Okay, so better urban planning and understanding of what heating and cooling can do integrated. Matthias?
I mean, we are talking about integration of various technologies, like integration of renewable energy. We are talking about integration of waste heat of any kind. We are talking about combining cooling and heating, and you just mentioned it. We need a kind of facilitating environment to push that whole subject. And there you can be of help to create an environment that let's say the integration via various businesses will be accelerated and it will be realized much faster.
Thank you. Nakano-san, for Japan, how is the situation the same? Do you look a bit different? What do you want from the Japanese government?
One point would be the proactive policies, including regulations, to achieve the ambitious goal of decarbonization. This is one point. And the second point would be the utilizing PV energy by shifting a heating time for water supply. This kind of R&D or maybe collaboration of the electric utilities and the manufacturers that would be the more important point.
Thank you. And then, Stefan, what is proactive policy for you? What can industry do to help you do that?
I think we are trying to serve society, also industry, but basically also citizens as a public authority, which we are at the European level, but of course there are several other layers and levels of public authority in Europe, and of course every country around the world is organized differently. I think what I think is most detrimental currently to efficient decision making is fake news, myths, which are spreading of wrong information and playing on emotional arguments, trying to basically attack others. So I think in the case of heat pumps in this country, but also elsewhere, we've seen a huge degree of recently of even wrong information being spread and being used strategically in order to attack others politically also. I think that has been most detrimental and should be prevented. I think we need open communication based on evidence, policy making based on evidence, and be as rational as possible. Explain the pros and cons, try to quantify where possible, and create a very good base of information to citizens, to society, and of course expect also that such information is coming from industry, for instance, to the extent that industry can influence that, because that creates confidence. If the confidence is not there, basically people play on emotions and what a scandal, what are they doing to me? I think we break down as a society, at least efficient decision making is no longer possible. And I think this area here on heat pumps in this country, specifically in the last few months, has suffered from that, but it's not the only country. I think in other countries it's gone much better. But it is certainly a challenge for informed policy making, which always goes both ways. Full information, stakeholder input, trying to structure and also digest the information properly. That creates confidence for citizens, and that allows them also, I would say, for designing more systemic solutions where you trust and have a full overview on the strengths and weaknesses and the needs of society. What we definitely need is in the next few years, I would say, as kind of coming together in society on that. Otherwise, we won't be able to get through the energy transition and also, I would say, effective climate action as well as we need to, because we have limited resources. It costs a lot of money. We need to see how we design the tools, how we rationalize the discussion process on the necessary regulatory changes, but also how to calibrate the subsidies, the financial help, and that can often go through, I would say, good technical information also to society and a kind of ownership and take-up by politicians also, and often the local, but also, of course, at higher levels.
Well, that was very, very comprehensive. We, as I will not do all of that, but we commit to provide the necessary facts so that you can do reasonable decision making. I think that also gives it very nicely back to Pablo and to IRENA, because we need bodies like IRENA that collect this type of information. As much as I would say, we also need bodies like the European Commission, because in this implementation phase that we have ahead of us, we do need some sort of stock taking, some sort of tracking mechanism where we say how far have the individual countries come, and then we can lift that to the international level, to IRENA and others, maybe also to the COP process, to say what is best practice that has helped us to decarbonize the heating system, the cooling system, and actually the system altogether, heating, cooling, the thermal sector and the electricity sector in system integration, to make societies more resilient and sustainable. Thank you very much. A warm round of applause to my panelists. You did really well.
Just before closing, I'm very happy because I have the feeling that we could be discussing here for the entire evening, because it's a complex topic, but we also show a lot of passion about how to move forward. I would just want to say thank you to the panelists and to our partner, Nowak and the European People Association, and say that all this discussion will fit into the different work streams in IRENA, including our next Innovation Landscape report coming in 2 years, the COP28, and the collaborative frameworks with our country members. So we really appreciate your participation and input to our work. And having said that, I just want to invite you to the dinner, network dinner that's happening downstairs. But before going, please, if any of you have your stuff in the cloakroom, the museum will close at 6. So if you want to enter the restaurant, you should do it from outside. So yeah, that's it. Thank you a lot. Please feel free to reach us out during the dinner or buying or any way you want. Thank you.